Good afternoon and welcome to the award-winning Ed Brown Show. I am your host, Kamaria T. Richmond, and we have a wonderful show for you this afternoon. We are talking to Larry LaRose, and Larry is an actor, speaker, and performance coach, and we're really going to get into it. I'm excited to have him here. So Larry, welcome to the Ed Brown Show.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, so we want to start with, when did you find the love for acting?
Probably not going to believe this, but when I was 6 years old, in first grade, in a parochial school in upstate New York, and the nun, I still remember her name, Sister Mary Elise, threw me out on the stage as Joseph at Christmas time when we were reenacting the birth of Christ. And I went out on stage and I saw all these other kids and teachers watching me. And for some reason, instead of being terrified, I was just excited by the whole thing. So pretty much that was my first experience on stage, and I've never wanted to leave it since then.
Well, you know, we were talking before, and I love a good movie, a good film. I like to call them films, but they're really, really good. And so what plays do you like to do, or what characters do you like to do?
You know, I'm really not sure if characters. I like to do a lot of different characters. I probably, I think I've invented maybe 150 in my lifetime now. I kind of tend towards drama more than any, but well, let me take that back. I kind of tend towards drama and comedy more than like musicals, although I've done a lot of musicals. But for me, in my opinion, is that musicals are actually more, I don't know, theater fluff for me. I tend to be more into like the Shakespeare, the serious dramas. I love doing dramedy, which most people don't know is actually a combination of comedy and drama built into one production. So I love plays that are written in that way, plays that are written kind of seriously, but also have humor thrown in, so that you have your highs and your lows. Because I like to take my audiences on that emotional ride when you're doing a play or when you're going to a movie, because everybody has their favorite movie, right?
Right.
And what we love is the fact that our emotions get caught up in that movie, and we get excited, or we get sad, or we cry, or we laugh, or whatever it is, and then when we leave the theater, we had the memory of those experiences.
Right.
So I like to create memories and experiences for my audience.
And that's, I love a good film, as I said, and we were talking, it's good acting for me when I see the person as the character, but not that artist or not that, let's say, star. And if I can see both, then I'm like, this isn't really acting.
Yeah, I've read some acting texts. I've done actually a lot of research in acting, but one director said that they asked him what the qualities of a great actor was, and he said, if you can see the acting, then the actor is not doing their job.
Right, I agree. So why Shakespeare?
Why Shakespeare? I'm gonna say I have a friend that I used to perform with when I lived in Pennsylvania, and we formed this really serious, what people considered the serious Shakespeare company in town, but we did a lot of other plays besides Shakespeare, but we did quite a bit of Shakespeare. And we were known as the serious actors in town. And the local newspaper, the Reading Eagle, because I lived in Reading, Pennsylvania, came to interview all of us when we were doing a production of Twelfth Night. And my friend sat there with the lead critic in town, and he asked him, why Shakespeare? And his answer was really great, and I have to agree with him, is that Shakespeare is the lifeblood of an actor. Because Shakespeare has held up for over 500 years.
Absolutely.
And it holds up even today.
Yes.
Because when you're studying classical theater, the first thing that comes to people's minds is Shakespeare.
Right.
They even make movies about it. They make movies with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yes.
You know, the English make Shakespeare movies all the time. Downton Abbey is based on some of Shakespeare's works, and it's very popular with the general public. So, excuse me, the reason you do Shakespeare is because that's the lifeblood of an actor. That's where you learn your craft. Shakespeare was a master of the written word, and he picked every word very succinctly to do its job. So there's no wasted text in a Shakespeare play. There's no fluffy lines or anything. Every line is meant to say or do what he wanted it to do. So he was definitely a wordsmith and a craftsman with his, with the way he put words together and the way he put them in phrasing and in sentences and in descriptions. Now, what's great about it is it's Old English.
Right.
So a lot of what the actor does is trying to translate that into something that is entertaining to the audience. In other words, you have to color the lines so that the people get the general gist of the meanings. Because most people don't understand Shakespeare. They read it and they go, you know, I have no idea.
Right.
So our challenge as an actor is to make it entertaining to you, because if I can make you entertained, if I can touch you in a humor way or even in a sad way or whatever, if I can touch you, make that emotional connection with you, then you understand the gist of the lines.
And that's what I love about acting is the emotion.
Right.
Because I will cry in a second if there is something, because you have to feel it. And once you feel it, and so that's the mark of a good actor, because you're making us feel the character and what's going on in their lives. So tell us about some of the movies you've been in or plays that you've been in.
I have done a couple.
You have done movies.
Well, I haven't done movies. I've done on-screen work.
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
Back in the early days, you may not. Do you know the play, The Glass Menagerie?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I started doing The Glass Menagerie in college. And for some reason, I have played the gentleman caller so many times in The Glass Menagerie that I still think I have it memorized today. And one of the films that I did was actually in Reading, Pennsylvania, when I lived there and part of the Shakespeare Company. And we did a production of The Glass Menagerie. Okay. And we actually did it on television. And I did the gentleman caller for, I don't know, the 10th time. Right. Or something like that. Anyway, like I said, I've done that role so many times. So that's, I guess I have to say that's one of my favorite early roles.
Okay.
And I can't do the gentleman caller anymore. I've kind of moved on to different roles now. But that would be one of the things that I did. Again, one of my first dramas, one of Tennessee Williams' most famous plays. One of his most famous heroines was Amanda Wingfield, who's the mother character in that. I mean, greats like Katharine Hepburn have played her. I had a couple of really fantastic actresses play opposite me in those productions. The other things I like are, again, the Shakespeare things I love. I did Tribute recently, which was a Jack Lemmon vehicle. Now, a lot of people don't remember who Jack Lemmon was, but he was one of the great actors of our time. Yeah, yes. One of the greatest. And I actually saw Jack Lemmon on Broadway do this particular production. Again, it's a dramedy. It was written by Bernard Slade. Some people might know that he wrote Same Time Next Year, that Alan Alda and Ellen Burstyn did in a movie.
Good one. Yeah, that's a good one.
So he wrote this play Tribute for Jack Lemmon, and I actually had the opportunity to see Jack Lemmon on Broadway perform this play. And many years later now, I actually got a chance to play Jack Lemmon's role, which I was very proud of because he was one of my heroes.
Oh, and you know, we were talking before, you know, it's so hard now for people to really hone in on their craft. I shouldn't say hard, I should say it's challenging for a lot of people, because look at what we're looking at now when we look at film or when we go to the theater. It's, you know, you're not always getting what you're used to getting, like from the old timers, as we say.
I don't like to use that word old timers though, because, you know, part of entertaining and part of this whole acting world is keeping up.
Right.
You know, keeping up.
Right.
I love to do the classics because I think that's where you develop your discipline.
Okay.
As an actor or as a performer, is you do the classics, and that's where you get your discipline. Now you take that discipline and you move it into the modern works that are going on.
Okay.
But there are some interesting things going on with movies. We're more into special effects now.
Yes.
So the words kind of get lost.
Yes.
Or it needs to be written in such a way where it doesn't happen. I think Robert Downey doing the Iron Man movies is a good example, because he takes the dialogue and turns it into something entertaining.
Yes.
You know, just by the way he delivers it, which is a sign of a really great actor, by the way.
Right, the delivery.
But he does that in the middle of all these special effects and explosions and things that are going on, but he still manages to practice the craft in the scene. So I think there is room for that. Johnny Depp does amazing things with,
he does too.
you know, with his character as he manages to get the actor into the scene,
Right.
even though there's all kinds of crazy things going on around him with special effects and, you know, green screens and all that's going on. He manages to practice the craft. So I think that there's still people practicing the craft. It's just that we get distracted by all the special effects and things. But there's still people out there that are doing it.
And I love to watch both of them.
Yeah.
And it's like the same thing almost now with music. There's so much going on. If you're watching a video, I don't know, I can't tell, okay, is it the artist that's actually doing the work, or is it someone in the background doing the work?
Right.
Because you're just kind of pulled all over the place. But let's talk about something else. We're going to talk about your wife.
Ah.
So let's talk
Interesting
about your
story.
wife. Yes.
Okay, my wife, this is a really interesting story. My wife and I met backstage. So my first bit of advice to everyone is, if you want to meet your soulmate, go do the things you love to do, because they're there. You know, they're there.
Absolutely.
So I was doing a play, which I was doing of Mice and Men, classic John Steinbeck play. And this was in college. And it's pretty much an all-male production. And it was closing night. My wife was in the audience with a friend of hers. And we were doing the play, and the director knew her friend he had met. You know, she ran a local dance studio. My wife was her assistant. They were teaching dance at the time. He invited him backstage after the show. Well, what I didn't know was that my wife's boyfriend was in the show with me, and they had just broken up the week before. And when she came backstage, she was desperately trying to avoid him. So she headed for the first friendly face that she knew. Now, we had met socially a couple times, you know. And to tell you the truth, I didn't want anything to do with her. I had no attraction for her whatsoever. But she came over to me that night, and we got along, and she was hungry because she was living on a graduate stipend. So she wanted to go to the cast party with us, which we always have at the end of a show. So I took her to the cast party. We ate, we drank, we had a great time. We went to one of the other actors' houses for breakfast. I mean, it was just a great night. And it's 40 years later, and I still can't get away.
That is amazing. That is amazing.
The next time, I mean, we did a show, that same director cast us in the next show that we did together called Thieves Carnival. That was the first time that her and I appeared on stage together. And we've been doing theater ever since. We even did Chekhov's Marriage Proposal before we were ever married. It was almost like foreshadowing here.
Right. That's great. And so let's say I want to be an actor.
Right.
What do I do? How do I find my way? Do I study? Do I just wing it? You know, how did you get to like your first big role?
If you pursue a role, you're probably never going to do that. Pursue the craft. I have a friend who's in New York City, and she is a dancer, singer, actress. And she's even gone so far. She's Kim Cattrall's stand-in for Sex and the City. She's also on Blue Bloods on TV.
Okay.
And she does a nightclub act with Joe Piscopo in New Jersey. Now, we met her when she was 17 years old. My wife was in a production of Chorus Line with her. And she decided during that production that she wanted to pursue this professionally. So she went to my wife, who was playing the older dancer, Sheila, and by this time we'd done, I don't know, 20 shows together or something like that. So we had a lot of experience. So she went to my wife and she said, what do I do because I want to become an actress professionally? And she goes, my wife says, go act. Just go. Go perform. Go find something. And so she said, if you want to learn how to act, go act. Whether they pay you or not, get the experience, get on the stage somewhere. So what she did was she joined Carnival Cruise Lines.
Okay.
And that's when she didn't go to school. Because she asked my wife, do I go to school? She said, if you can get on stage, you go to school.
Right.
If you can't get on stage, don't go to school. You know, go to where you can get on stage.
Right.
Go act. So she went to Carnival Cruise Line. She signed up with them. She got hired as an entertainer. That's where she learned her acting and her singing. And, not really acting so much, but dancing and singing.
Okay.
Then when she got done with Carnival Cruise Line, she moved to New York City to try and make it. Now, obviously, living off mom and dad for a while.
Of course.
But she's, you know, that was 30 years ago. And she's making a living. She lives on 45th Street in New York City. She's making a living acting, singing, and dancing.
Living her dream.
So, do you want to learn how to act? Go act.
Just go do it. Now, you have some props for us.
I do.
And so tell us about those.
Well, the props aren't going to make any sense right now because we should really talk about a show that I did.
Well, let's talk about the show.
Okay. And an award that I won.
Yes, we're going to talk about that.
So, a couple years ago, I did a play called True here at the Greenbelt Arts Center. Now, I don't know if your audience knows who Truman Capote was, but Truman Capote was one of the most important authors of the 20th century. And he practically invented what I would call the nonfiction novel genre.
Okay.
And he did that by writing a book called In Cold Blood, which was this very serious work about a family in Kansas that was cold-bloodedly murdered by 2 ex-convicts in their farmhouse.
Oh, my goodness.
And In Cold Blood is a psychological study of that crime and the investigation that ensued around it. Anyway, so Truman Capote, most people know, wrote a book called Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Yes.
Which most people know more than In Cold Blood, but they also probably know his childhood friend, who just happened to be Harper Lee, who wrote a little book called To Kill a Mockingbird. And they grew up together in Monroeville, Alabama. Now, a couple years ago, I did a production of a play called True, which was written by Truman Capote and his friend, J. Preston Allen, about the later time in his life.
Okay.
And this was a 2-hour show that I did on stage, 2 hours by myself, playing Truman Capote, the author.
That's amazing. For 2 hours.
For 2 hours. And for that effort, I won the Watch Award, the Washington Area Theater Community Honors Award, for outstanding performance by a lead actor in a play for that particular year. Now, most people don't know who the Watch Award is, so I'll tell you who they are. The Watch Award is made up of about 30 different theater companies around the Beltway of Washington, D.C. Now, the year that I won was 2015, was the production year. I won the award in 2016. That particular year, the Watch Award committee was made up of 30 different companies. And between those 30 companies, there were 110 productions. There were 300 actors considered for their performances in those shows. 5 of us got nominated, and by some stroke of luck, I won.
It was destined.
I guess. I guess. And so the reason I brought this is because this was the hat I wore when I did Truman Capote.
Nice.
And when I won that award. So I brought my props to kind of show off a little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
And I also brought, Truman Capote was famous for his selection of glasses, by the way. Truman Capote had 2 things going for him. He liked the hats that he wore, and he had a large selection of glasses, mostly round-rimmed, all right? And he liked to goof on people a lot.
Okay.
He's actually kind of narcissistic because he really liked himself, and he liked talking about himself. But I don't think in reality he really liked himself that much. He was really, I think he was in a lot of pain. But anyway, so when I was doing him, I just brought these props because I wanted to see if I could transform myself into Truman for a few minutes.
Well, you look like him right now.
And he has a very distinct way of speaking.
Yes.
And he has a very distinct way of moving. And he talks in exaggerated tones, and he had a very high voice, which people thought that he was delicate. And he would tell you, I'm as delicate as a pit bull. And he liked to talk about the rich. He'd say, the rich. Oh, the rich. Most of them are pretty sad, really. Most of them don't have any other values but their money. Money, money, money. That's all that's important to them. That's why they hang together so desperately. Not that they like each other, they don't. So, a yacht and 5 houses is what they have in common. So whenever they can, they like to take in amusing little artists.
Uh-huh.
Like me. And I spent years hanging out with the big rich, just going everywhere in their super planes with their little feet of fresh-born food, and the baby lamb that's been ripped from the mother's womb. Oh no, no, they eat well, and they never hit you up for a loan.
I love that.
So that's Truman Capote talking about the rich.
Okay, and we have another.
Oh, this is just the Savannah. He loved his Savannah hats. This is a Savannah hat, and when Truman was from the South.
Okay.
So Monroeville, Alabama. So his collection of hats were kind of legendary, and he would wear them in different. Well, the other thing was, as with me, he lost his locks.
Yeah, the locks.
Because in another section of the play, he says, when I was young, I was pretty, very popular, and all the boys wanted to sleep with me, from the headmaster on down. He was also gay before gay was popular.
Right.
So he was right out there.
He was there. He was ready.
He was.
And what was it about him that you said, okay, this is something I really want to do? What was it about him?
You know what? I didn't. I'll tell you what happened. This was because of my wife.
Wow.
Okay? And we talked about her before. I guess my wife and I have been a great partnership for our lifetime anyway. So what happened was this. We were in Pennsylvania, and we were working Shakespeare, a lot of Shakespeare, and the director, who just happened to be an English teacher, very, very good. English, she taught English and German. But she was a great fan of literature. And she was the one who set up all the Shakespeare plays, because she was very, very into Shakespeare. And she was very good at translating it for the audience, or at least putting us into action so that the audience got it when we got on stage. And I'm very grateful to her, because in a production of Twelfth Night, I was actually able to steal the show from the principals with a minor role. But I was playing Sir Andy Aguchick, and the character's an idiot.
Okay.
But he's very much, he's a lot of fun to play, because he's the comic relief for the show. He's one of the comic reliefs in the show. So it was just great fun. But anyway, she went to my wife, and she said, I think Larry's really, really talented. And I think he can carry a one-man show. So what one-man show do you think he should do? And my wife said, and back then it was, I'm going to say it was 80, it was in the 80s. And Bobby Morse was doing True, the play that I did, on Broadway. And he actually won a Tony for the award as best actor it was back in the early 80s, might have been 1980. Anyway, he won the award, and my wife, we saw the show on PBS, and she said, Larry could do Truman Capote. And the rights for True, the play, were not available, because J. Preston Allen, the author, was very, very protective of the rights, so he kept them put away, and he would not give them to anybody. He really wanted to make sure that True was only a star turn, so you really had to be a star to do the play. So he wouldn't let anybody have the rights. So what we did instead was, since we were part of the Shakespeare company there, the director decided to put together some excerpts from other Truman works. And what we did was a fundraiser where I played Truman Capote opposite my wife, who was going to play Dorothy Parker, the women's author, back in the 50s, who was very famous for her lightning wit and the fact that she basically used men the way men used women in the 50s, kind of like, Strong. She was also a very straight shooter. Dorothy Stratton was very much ahead of her time, very much ahead of her time, and she was notorious. She was part of the Adirondack Round Table that was made up of different authors and critics at the time that were, very powerful. You know, people like Charlie McCarthy,
Okay.
you know, people like that were involved with her, with Dorothy Parker. Anyway, they used to meet in the Adirondack Mountains of New York. That's how they got their name, the Adirondack Round Table.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so she played Dorothy Parker, I played Truman Capote, and from that, we got into the whole Larry should do Truman Capote as a one-man show. When we moved here to Maryland, I got involved with the Greenbelt Arts Center. Director there saw me in a couple different productions, actually suckered me into doing a play that only had 8 rehearsals left because they fired the lead actor, and I had to fill in, and in 8 rehearsals, I had to memorize that show. Anyway, she decided I could do this, and then I found a producer, and as luck would have it, I was able to pick my director, I was able to pick my producer, I was able to find my sound man, my lights man. I mean, my wife was involved because she helped with the costuming. She did some of the recording for the voices on the phone in the production, and I got a friend of mine who's a fantastic photographer, did the photos. It was just an amazing production that I just got to do. It was my dream project. So that's how it all came to be. My wife hadn't suggested it, we never would have done it. So the reason I won, the reason why I got to do this production, it's all because of her.
And that's why you've been together 40 years.
We've been together 40 years.
I
40 years.
love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And do you see that coming up soon? Another one-man play, another 2-hour stint?
If somebody were interested, I would certainly be up for it.
Okay.
I think I would, there's a great one-man show out there that Henry Fonda did, and when he played Clarence Darrow.
Okay.
Most people don't remember this, but he was the lawyer for the Scopes monkey trial that the movie Inherit the Wind is based on. Spencer
Really?
Tracy played the character in the movie. So, and later on, Jason Robards did on television with Kirk Douglas. Clarence Darrow was a very famous lawyer from the 30s and 40s, a very powerful lawyer. So they did this whole one-man show where Henry Fonda played Clarence Darrow. That would be an interesting thing to bring up. But most people aren't going to remember who Clarence Darrow was.
Right.
You know, except for the fact that it was a very famous Supreme Court case.
Right.
You know, it was the Supreme Court case that decided whether you could teach evolution or creationism.
Now that's an interesting.
As the two conflicting things, that's what the play is based on, that trial.
Yeah, and so we're dealing with that today.
Yeah.
In the school system, that is. So I'd like to see you do that.
That would be an interesting subject to try and tackle.
Yeah, so you're going to keep working for a long time.
Oh, I like playing historical figures. I think Truman's a historical figure. Now, he's very flawed. He was a very flawed man. I mean, he wasn't a nice guy, really.
Okay.
He was a gossip. He told stories. I mean, he told true stories. Because that was part of his namesake, right? Because he said when he came to New York, he said he was born in Monroeville, Alabama, and he was named Truman Struckfors Persons was his name, was his real name.
Larry, we're going to talk about something else in our next segment.
Sure.
I could listen to you all day. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We're talking to Larry LaRose, and we're going to continue our conversation with Larry. We're going to talk about acting and business. So excited to talk about that because you can actually do both.
And who said that?
I did. Now that's a major key alert.
Learn the real major keys to getting to college at getschool.com.